Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Case. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee of the Municipal Waste Management Association, or MWMA. On behalf of all of us here at MWMA, we want to welcome you to today's webinar on safely recycling lithium-ion batteries. MWMA exists primarily to provide professional development, networking, and educational opportunities for municipal solid waste managers and executives working for cities, counties, and regional solid waste authorities across the country through events like today's webinar and also through our annual conference, which I'll say more about at the end of today's conversation. But for now, let's focus in on today's topic, lithium-ion batteries, which we all know by now present a thorny recycling issue. They're indispensable, or as it would seem, and they power the gadgets and electronics most vital to our everyday lives. But they're also dangerous, not only to source, but to recycle. By now, many of you may have heard of the deadly fire yesterday at a lithium-ion battery factory in South Korea. And just recently, we experienced our own fire locally here in Montgomery County due to lithium-ion batteries at a transfer station. Safely recycling lithium-ion batteries hasn't just been a recycling issue. It's a workplace and worker safety issue. Furthermore, it's a pressing manufacturer-producer responsibility issue. At some point, we're going to have the difficult conversation about who bears responsibility for ensuring that these batteries are safely recycled, and beyond that, looking proactively and strategically at the materials we currently mine to power our electronics and find safer alternatives. But for today's webinar, we're going to focus on the aspect that is most directly in our purview, and that is the safe recycling of lithium-ion batteries. And for that reason, we are so very pleased to have with us today Dr. Judy Jeevarajan, a Vice President and Executive Director for the Electrochemical Safety Research Institute at UL Research Institutes, ULRI. Judy has more than 27 years of experience in the area of batteries, with a primary focus on lithium-ion chemistry and battery safety research, including safety trends in aged lithium-ion cells and modules, thermal runaway propagation in lithium-ion battery systems, characterizing fire and fire suppressants for lithium-ion batteries, and consumer battery safety. Judy has a much longer and more illustrious bio that you can view on the webinar registration page, and we'll drop that link in the chat. Before I hand the reins over to Judy, I do want to begin with a little housekeeping items. First, please keep in mind, you'll all be muted for the course of the webinar. That said, we've structured this webinar to leave ample time to answer any questions you might have after the presentation. So please use the Ask Question function that you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen and send us a question at any point during the webinar. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can, and if there are any questions we can't get to, we'll do our best to get you the answers after this webinar. And that is it for me now. Without further ado, let me turn over the comms to Judy. Thank you so much, Judy, for joining us here today. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Share my screen. Put myself on presentation mode. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jubi, for this opportunity. Thanks to MWMA for this opportunity to speak to its members. And Andrew, thank you very much. So today I wanted to talk about safely recycling lithium-ion batteries, where we are and where we want to be, or where we need to be. As Jubi and Andrew mentioned, I'm Judy Jeevarajan. I lead the Electrochemical Safety Research Institute at UL Research Institutes. And this is a little bit of an introduction about me. I don't know if Andrew already provided the introduction, but I've been with, just to give you a brief, I've been with UL Research Institutes for about 9 years now. Before that, I was with NASA. First as a contractor and then as a civil servant for about 18 years. I have more than 28 years of experience with lithium-ion batteries on the research and safety side. And, I have my degrees and all of that is given. So we can just get on to, the main part of my presentation. The mission and goal of the Electrochemical Safety Research Institute is to advance safer energy storage through science. And we have been working on safety research in the area of batteries, especially lithium-ion batteries, for a really, really long time. And in the past 2 years, we have been working on looking at novel materials in the area of energy storage, and also seeing if there are any new types of energy forms that we can study and characterize, and also understand the safety. We have a couple of experts, and these experts have been with us for, I would say, about 2 years now, 1 to 2 years, who look at modeling and simulation also of energy storage, both at the material level as well as at a cell and module level, to understand the material characteristics as well as to understand the off-nominal conditions and the hazards associated with lithium-ion batteries. And of course, we have a very good team that helps us with outreach and communications, and we also work on several standards committees. Just a little bit of information on funding that we have, or work that is going on in terms of our activities in the area of battery recycling. We did receive a DOE fund recently to look at as part of a big project that is looking at safe, innovative shredding and also electrolyte removal for battery recycling. This focused mainly on lithium-ion batteries and also for recovery of the metals in lithium-ion batteries. We have been running a campaign since, I would say it's actually for the past 2 years or so, where we want, but in the past year, we've been very active in raising the public awareness of safe lithium-ion battery recycling. And we also have a research project with Rice University, which we carried out for about 2 years, and we are waiting to start the next phase on safe and efficient recycling of materials that are used in lithium-ion batteries. Here we use different paths to regenerate the metals and also create new electrodes, and see if we can study the performance and look at the efficiency of regenerating those metals. So now I'm going to get into the question of the importance of the area of importance of recycling. So where are we today? If you look at our battery, on the battery side, almost about 99% of lead acid batteries in the US are recycled. And but when we come to lithium ion, I think there is not enough awareness that these can also be recycled. The other thing is, we also find, one of our sister research institutes found that almost 58% of people who have devices that use lithium-ion batteries don't even know that they have lithium-ion batteries. So we do have, a lot of work we want to do in order to educate the consumers on the presence of these batteries and also how to dispose of them correctly. Because if you dispose of them incorrectly, they can create risks. And today, recycling of lithium-ion batteries and the regulations related to that is not in place. We are looking at working on them, working on at least recommending some guidelines, and I'll talk about it at the very end. But we do not have any regulations in place that require recycling of lithium-ion batteries. And manufacturers of lead acids, as well as other types such as alkalines, they take responsibility for recycling and have take-back programs. So it's almost like what the EPA calls an extended manufacturer program. And I'll mention that a little bit. That's how it is with lead acids. The manufacturers are actually expected and required to take back a major portion or majority of the batteries that they actually produce. Where do we need to be? We want to be in the same position with lithium-ion batteries too. They should be safely recycled for many reasons. One is to reduce battery fires as well as the toxic emissions that come when you have a battery fire, lithium-ion battery fire. We want to reduce the leakage of harmful metals into the groundwater from batteries and landfills. And we also want to recover and reuse the expensive metals, thereby contributing to a circular economy. So we're not going back and mining for those metals, those expensive metals again. So some of the, I want to mention quickly, what the hazards are and the risks with lithium-ion batteries. First, I want to just say a little bit about the differences in the battery chemistries. Most of us are very familiar with lead-acid batteries. They are found as starter batteries in cars, and we also use them in, as backup power. We sometimes find them in residential homes because with the latest changes we've had in weather, with Texas seeing snowstorms in unexpected areas, we've had with power outages, we've had to get UPSs in our homes also. But of course, they're very common in industrial buildings. They are also very common in large high-rise and large buildings as backup power. And these use lead-acid batteries. But we also have been, seeing lithium-ion batteries in our everyday use, where we are looking at personal devices like the power tools, our laptops, our camcorder batteries, camera batteries, iPads, and so on. But today we also are seeing them in our electric vehicles. We're seeing them in grid energy storage. They're already in space. The space station, International Space Station, is powered by lithium-ion batteries, and we are seeing them in marine applications too. Not only being transported in ships, but also powering, ships and so on. Of course, we know a lot about alkaline batteries. They've been in existence for many decades. You usually find them in flashlights, alarm clocks, with TV remote controls, and so on. And the alkalines obviously are much less expensive. They're very inexpensive. So with lithium-ion batteries, they were first commercialized in the 1990s. These came right after the metal hydrides and the NiCads, were in the market. And three leading scientists actually won the Nobel Prize for inventing this battery chemistry. So they had different parts of innovation, as well as bringing it into being a commercial battery pack or a battery. And there are many advantages associated with it. They're very lightweight, they're small, so they occupy a very low volume, and they're hence portable. And they also exhibit very good performance. And if you remember, in the past 2 decades, in the past, we used to have to charge these batteries so often, but now we can actually run them for a day or two and not have to put it back on the charger. And also the charging time is much faster than what it used to be in those days. So there's a lot of changes and improvements that are being made. And so lithium-ion batteries still are a leading candidate for portable applications, as well as some of our other large battery, high voltage, high capacity applications. But the disadvantage with them is that they undergo what we call thermal runaway, which means there's a sudden increase in temperature if you don't, if they are, in an off-nominal condition, which also means that, if you don't design, charge them or use them correctly. And along with this, what we call thermal runaway, which means it's a sudden increase in temperature, that can also be a fire and smoke, or just smoke associated with it. But the temperatures are very high. It can range, depending on the chemistries that we're using, it can range all the way from about 350 to 400 degrees C, all the way above 1,000 degrees C. So you can see that, it is a pretty energetic chemistry. So that is what the disadvantage of this particular chemistry is. But as I said, it's used in a lot of applications. Some of the things that affect the safety of lithium-ion cells and batteries can be categorized into 3 main categories. One of them is mechanical, the other one is thermal, and then the last is electrical. The electrical one is the one that's fully understood, or very well understood. And so we can actually put safety controls in place to control many of these, except for the manufacturing defects, which, if you have counterfeit batteries, or if you have low quality manufacturing, you may be introducing defects into your batteries that you really cannot screen for in a good manner, and then you might have a field failure, which results in a fire. But that's it's a very small probability of occurrence. It's more of the other hazards that are, more common if you don't design it correctly, but you can, put safety controls in place. The thermal hazards are also well understood, and people should keep in mind that high temperatures as well as very low temperatures can actually be a hazard to lithium-ion cells and batteries when you're using them. If in case of the low temperatures, if it's just sitting in cold temperatures, it's fine. But if you're trying to charge it or use it in those temperatures, you could have a problem. High temperatures, obviously, it's just going to increase the temperature of your battery to even higher levels, and you could have decomposition inside and you can have failures. With respect to the mechanical, that's a little bit more difficult to quantify, but we do know that vibration can cause your interconnects to become loose and so on. Impact can actually cause a short circuit inside your battery, and shocks can also do that to your battery. So all of these, can affect the safety of your lithium-ion cells and batteries. I just have a couple of very nice, videos on the electrical hazards that we see with lithium-ion. One is an overcharge, and the other one is so that one we had overcharged it, which means we are trying to put more energy into it than it can actually handle, so it gets hot and then it can have a hazardous event. When you do the other part where you're over discharging or you're removing more than what the manufacturer recommends, then you can also cause changes inside the battery that at some point where the failure may not be immediate, but at some point it can go into a hazardous failure condition too. And then we also have high temperatures and short circuits that can also affect the safety of the battery, as I mentioned. So now I want to talk about hazards of mixing battery chemistries during recycling. Lead acid batteries, need to be will be crushed in the first step of the recycling process in the recycling facilities. But if you do that to lithium-ion batteries, you will actually experience a fire. And I had mentioned that impact can cause a fire in lithium-ion batteries, right? So when you crush your lithium-ion battery in along with the lead-acid batteries, you will have a fire. And we have known, recycling facilities completely burning down because inadvertently lithium-ion batteries were actually mixed with the lead-acid batteries. And we also, want to mention that battery chemistry should not be mixed when even placing them in recycling bins. They can catch on fire during transportation as well as in the recycling facility. And when mixed with regular trash, or if they are not packaged correctly, you can have short circuits that can also lead to a fire. So when you look at a battery by itself, when it's not inside the device, it could have the terminals exposed. And if there's any metal or any way that, there's a short circuit across the terminals, you can have a fire that would then propagate to the other materials in the trash or in the recycling bin, leading to a larger fire. So some of the risks of improper disposal, are listed here. One of the things is that, let me see, sorry, I think. So the EPA actually put out a report. I'm not sure why it keeps moving. In 2021, the EPA actually put out a report that said that they found more than 200 fires that were reported at waste facilities across the country. And they think that this was associated with lithium-ion battery fires. And we also have a recently released report from the NWRA and the RRS that said that a new report from these two agencies, organizations, estimates that more than 5,000 fires occur annually at recycling facilities. And material recovery facilities, which are also called MRFs, process single-stream recycling, and increasingly, these facilities are also experiencing catastrophic fires because lithium-ion batteries had been erroneously placed by consumers in with their recyclables. So that is something we need to keep in mind, that we do not put these batteries in regular trash or in regular recycling bins where we are looking at recycling paper or plastic or even glass for that matter. So I wanted to quickly discuss some operational strategies for safe battery recycling. So for municipal waste and waste recycling managers, we need to make sure that we use safe and battery specific collection systems and have the appropriate labeling for them. And we need to also store and ship the batteries appropriately. So there are shipping guidelines for shipping batteries. If you work with some of the the national recycling organizations and some of the well-known recycling organizations like Call to Recycle, they actually can tell you or give you the relevant boxes that you can use to send the batteries back to them in a safe manner. And they'll also talk to you or give you information on how to safely store those boxes, as well as store the batteries and ship the batteries, or how to package the batteries and ship the batteries to them in the boxes. And you should also use recycling centers and programs which have lithium-ion battery experience or expertise, as well as the capability. There might be some that are only collecting certain types of batteries. So you need to make sure that the recycling centers and programs that you're working with are actually able to work with lithium-ion batteries. We also have to have an emergency response plan in place just in case people are inadvertently putting other battery chemistries, or they're not packaging the batteries properly before they put them into the recycling bins. That way, you are assured that if you do have a fire, especially during non-working hours, which has happened, that there is some plan in place to take care of those kinds of unexpected events. We also want to promote safe lithium-ion battery disposal in all the communities, in your communities. And some of the other things we want to talk about is how to dispose of the batteries in a safe manner. And this is mostly for consumers as well as residents in your communities. Each device or the battery should be placed in individually sealed plastic bags. And when you work with organizations like Call to Recycle, they actually send you those bags, and you have to put just one device or one battery in a single plastic bag, and you have to seal it. And if it's just a battery and not inside a device, it's also good to tape the terminals just in case your bag breaks open or something. It's good to make sure that you tape the terminals, that are the exposed terminals of your battery, before placing them inside the bag and sealing the bag. And lead acid batteries that are in sealed plastic bags should be disposed of in recycling bins that are dedicated to lead acid batteries. So make sure it says this is where lead acid should be should be disposed of. And same thing goes with lithium-ion. They specifically say these are for lithium-ion, and you have to segregate them. And also call the relevant recycling company whose bins you are using, or check their website and follow the correct procedure for it to be collected or sent to their facility. One thing I do want to point out is when it comes to Call to Recycle, they actually collect all batteries and all cell phones, and they have a very good process in place where they can segregate the different battery chemistries. But in general, you will find, if you go to certain places like certain retailers like Home Depot or Lowe's, you should be able to find lithium-ion battery recycling bins also. And anytime you have any questions, you should be able to reach out to the company that you're working with in terms of the recycling or the bins that you're using. And advocacy for safe battery recycling, we spoke at the Committee on Science, Space and Technology earlier this year. This was the House Science Committee. And we mentioned about safe recycling. And so we are trying to do our best from the Electrochemical Safety Research Institute's point of view on sharing our knowledge on battery safety, what can happen if we don't follow the rules and regulations, and also trying to encourage the message and the passing on of the message of safe recycling. I wanted to quickly talk about some of the national and international efforts in lithium-ion recycling. I do want to say again, that we do not have any regulations in place at this time to recycle lithium-ion batteries, but we do have a bill in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is Section 70401, that talks about three different things. One is battery collection best practices, and this is to identify and increase accessibility to battery collection locations, promote consumer education, and also to reduce hazards from improper disposal. The second thing is the 70401C, which talks about voluntary battery labeling guidelines. So, one of the things is, they want to make sure that what is being developed here will be acceptable and made into a regulation at some point. But at this point, what we are looking to do is to develop the voluntary guidelines to improve battery collection and reduce battery waste by promoting consumer education and reducing safety concerns that are related to improper disposal. And lastly, there's also another section, the 40207F, where we are talking about National Battery Extended Producer Responsibility Framework. And this is to address recycling goals, collection models, reporting requirements, and also outlining pathways for effective recycling. And this is what I talked about earlier. The extended producer responsibility is making this a responsibility of the device or the battery producer. It depends on, what agreement this group or this committee comes to. But in general, when you look at lead acid batteries, the lead acid battery manufacturer actually has the responsibility to recycle, a certain percentage. And I think today it's about 98% of what they produce. But as you know, we are doing in the US, we are actually recycling 99% of lead acid batteries that are produced. So it is pretty effective when it becomes a law and it becomes a regulation. So hopefully, with lithium-ion batteries too, they will be able to establish a regulation that puts, the responsibility on the producer of the battery itself. And the plan right now is for the finalized collection of best practices for state, tribal, and local governments to be submitted to Congress in 2026. So hopefully this will, we are making progress. Actually, it's been in work for the past 2 years, but this month was the first time I got introduced to this group. And so I'm really looking forward to learning more and working with the team to come up with the recommendations. There's another parallel effort, which is more on, I would say it's a smaller group, but it's an international group called the World Economic Forum. And here they started a new working group that will be studying circularity in the lithium-ion battery space, and also understanding what the best practices and challenges for reuse are, as well as recycling of this battery chemistry. So when you think about circularity, right, it can be either reusing the battery again or recycling it. So you can actually get the metals back in a more efficient manner. Reuse can be taking batteries from an automotive sector from first use and using it in an application such as a stationary grid energy storage, where there's a lesser need for power compared to an automotive application. But your battery is still in good health, so it can be reused. And then, of course, after some point, you would want to recycle it again to recover the metals and the materials that are used in the battery itself. And we also have had this campaign, as I mentioned, we've had the Be Nice to Your Device campaign, which has been running for the past 2 years. In the past year, we've been a little bit more, doing a lot more outreach to talk about our public safety campaign and reaching out to different sectors. And on the next page, I have, information on what we've been doing so far. We have been encouraging our own, organizations, employees, as well as the public to safely recycle lithium-ion batteries. Our internal events, in our internal events, we actually have battery collection drives in the offices, so people can bring in the batteries and make sure that they are, safely putting them in these recycle bins. And we've been working with Call to Recycle on this. And we would also like to use some of those batteries for our research purposes. We've also been part of community events and industry events where we are, where we've had booths and our scientists being present there to talk about safe recycling of lithium-ion batteries. And the other thing we've also been doing is educational outreach to students. This past week, our communications team has been in summer camps, talking to people, talking to the students about safe recycling. And I think they were able to reach almost 500 students in this period of 1 week and talk to them about, how to recycle the batteries. We also talk to high school clubs. We are working with some club in the Fort Bend County in the Houston area, Fort Bend area. And, they are interested in bringing the school kids together to see if they could safely collect and recycle lithium-ion batteries. We also go to student expos. We also work with other nonprofit organizations, like, as I mentioned, Call to Recycle. And the TechFest Live is the one that I mentioned that had the summer camp. We also, have resources, that's free information that is on this website, which is benicetoyourdevice.org. We have educational materials, flyers, videos, and different contact information and so on. So feel free to reach out or look into that. So what I would like to do now is to summarize my recommendations and also the takeaways. So we should recycle lithium-ion batteries in a safe manner. It is really imperative that we do that for several different reasons. One is that it will reduce health as well as environmental concerns, and because we can reduce the need to mine for more metals and elements, because mining also for these metals and elements also causes environmental concerns and health concerns to the people working there. And we can do safe disposal, which will reduce fires in solid waste collection systems as well as in material recycling facilities. And we will also prevent contamination of soil and groundwater due to leaching of the contaminants in landfills if we just throw them in the trash. So what are our recommended actions that we can take? We want to encourage safe recycling in our communities, in your communities, discuss the importance of safe recycling, provide education on the differences in recycling for various products and materials, and also implement programs that encourage and provide opportunities for safe recycling. And you can always reach out to the experts in our group, the Electrochemical Safety Research Institute at UL Research Institutes, if you have questions. And that's my contact. And now I am open to questions.
Well, thank you so very much for that presentation. And now we do indeed have time for some questions from the audience. Just a reminder, if you have a question or two, to please go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and type in those questions. Jubi, lead us on. What do we have?
We do have a couple of questions waiting. And again, yes, any questions you have, type into the Q&A chat function, not chat, Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And we will try to get to questions we don't answer here later. There's a question from Bridget Anderson with the City of Elizabeth. The City of Elizabeth is struggling with storage of lithium-ion batteries after fires. We are researching if we are required to confiscate, but the firefighters do not want to leave at the site for obvious reasons. What would you suggest?
Let me see. So are you saying that they are trying to find ways to dispose of the burnt batteries?
Bridget, if you want to elaborate on your question, please feel free to add again into the Q&A function. But from the reading, I would assume they say struggling with storage of lithium-ion batteries after fires. So she says to your question, yes. How to safely dispose of seems to be the question, right? Yeah.
Yes, I think you do need to work with the recycling facility. They may have to pay something to, for those batteries to be taken to the recycling facilities and for the recycling facilities to accept them. So that is the best thing that they can do. They have to work with the recycling facility to take the batteries there so they can be recycled or disposed of in the right manner.
Thank you. We have another question from Richard Coupland, and Richard raised his hand. I'm thinking you have a question, Richard, because you raised your hand. So I'm talking just to give you time to lower your hand in case you didn't want to ask a question, which I see you've done. If you decided you wanted to ask a question, Richard, please do put it in the chat or let me know again in the Q&A function, or let me know by raising your hand again. Okay. Question from Kendall Christensen. Several states and cities are proposing and adopting lithium-ion battery laws. Are they realistic or just aspirational? Kind of a broad question, but you might have a perspective on this, Judy.
I don't know what the laws are, but if I could have an idea of what the laws are, then I can actually explain. But if your cities and states are proposing and adopting these laws, which means they are regulations, I think they should be realistic. If they are, just recommendations, then I would wait for them to become regulations before you adopt them.
Okay. Bridget has a follow-up question, which is, where do we find the recycling facilities?
You can look at our website, benice2yourdevice.org, and I think you should be able to find information on recycling facilities. They also will give you, there's also contact information for recycling organizations and so companies. So you can, look at that and contact them to find out, how they can work with you. If you have, too many issues, just come back to us. You have my email address. We can work with you to help you to, go through the process.
Great. Henry Gabriel has a question. What recommendations do you have for an island community in regards to lithium-ion battery recycling and the issue of shipping off island?
Well, I don't know if you want to contaminate an island just for this. I would say the safe recycling using a battery recycling company is probably a better way to do it rather than store it somewhere, because it's going to cause contamination in the, in the island that you're working with.
Right.
So I would say, it's best to recycle it and make use of the materials because they are expensive rather than just trying to, store them somewhere. I think Jubi, there was a question on discharging the batteries before disposal.
Yes.
So there's one thing I want to mention. When you say, a battery is fully discharged, that doesn't mean that the cells inside them are fully discharged, because the battery operational voltage can be much less than what a cell can operate at. So 0% state of charge for a battery does not mean a 0% state of charge for a cell. So I would say you still, need to, follow the requirements, which is to tape the terminals of the battery and place them in individual bags before you dispose of them in the recycling bins.
Okay, excellent. There is a question from Anish about whether there are guidelines or standards available for safe storage of batteries in school or research laboratories.
There are no guidelines or standards currently in place, but we can, we have actually generated some material for Customs and Border Patrol on safe storage of batteries at the, Customs and Border Patrol locations. So we can actually share some of those good practices, recommended practices for safe storage. And, if you reach out to me, we can help you with some of that.
All right. Maybe, Judy, what we will do is in our follow-up email, we will include an email address that you give me, either your direct email
Yes.
address or another email address, so that people who have any follow-up questions can contact you directly.
Yes, that'll be fine.
Perfect, perfect. We have some questions coming in that are larger policy and regulation questions. Jen Fott, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, asks, do you think it's best for battery handling regulations to be adopted at the federal, state, or local level? And that's probably the billion-dollar question. And I have a theory of the answer, and I wonder if it's correct. So
please go ahead.
Oh, my theory is yes, as in at every level. But maybe that's over-regulation in your opinion. So you tell us what the best science says.
Well, the thing is, this is my experience. Okay, when it comes to a federal level, it takes a while to do things. I think there's more independence at the local level. So I would encourage that you start doing things at the local level. And of course, as the federal regulations develop, then it'll actually flow down. But if we wait for it, might take forever. As I said with the EPA, they're planning to provide the recommendations in 2026. That's 2 years from now. And then once the recommendations are provided, and then they go back and forth between, do we really want to make these regulations and so on? That might be another 2 or 3 years. So I would say start, at the local level as much as possible. But of course, when, the federal regulations come in, it'll flow down as needed.
Excellent. Thank you. Sort of a follow-up question to that, that just happens, I think, to dovetail nicely, is Therese Chapman is asking whether you know of any cities that have successful campaigns for proper battery disposal.
No, I am not aware of any cities that have a safe or successful campaign. And Jubi, if you have any thoughts on that, you can share that too.
I am not personally aware of any, but what we often do in this situation is we have a sort of community of several hundred city, council, county, and regional solid waste authority executives that we email to regularly, and we can put the question out to them. And because the Q&A function is available in here, if anybody on this webinar knows of a city or a county or a regional solid waste authority that does have a successful campaign, please feel free to share, and we would love to reach out to them and hear from them, and maybe in tandem with ESRI and ULRI in a webinar, or maybe in their own standalone webinar. I see that, Kendall, you sent a link. Once I have a chance later to review that link, maybe that is about the question of whether or not any city has a safe campaign or not. But otherwise, I will take it and look at it later. There is a question from our friend Alex Halu with the city of Los Angeles. Public education is very expensive. Are you aware of any federal funding to educate customers?
Yeah, if you remember the EPA, the slide that I presented on the EPA efforts, that does include consumer education. So I think that would be a big part of whenever it becomes a part of a recommendation, at least that goes to Congress. I think we would have federal funding that will be allocated for this. There's actually a call from the DOE recently that included people educating local communities. So that is they are putting the Department of Energy is also putting in efforts to see if the people who have the expertise can educate their local communities, and they were willing to fund it. So I think there are multiple efforts that are going on that will help a lot with some of this educating the consumers.
Wonderful. These questions, just so you know, I'm trying to manage them the best I can, but they're coming in fast and furious now. So this is clearly a topic people want to talk about. Josephine Valencia, our friend from San Antonio, says, I wouldn't say it's successful yet, which sounds like it's sort of in the incubative inaugural stages, but San Antonio has a battery commercial and door hanger that they distributed throughout the city. Josephine, and Andrew will do a little commercial for this later, but maybe this is the year you come to the Fall Summit, the MWMA Fall Summit in Santa Fe, September 10th, 11th, and 12th, and talk about this campaign in concert with our conversation with Judy and ULRI about these kinds of effective campaigns and where to go from here. So that's not a joke, Josephine. I'm going to be following up with you on that specific thing. So expect that email or call. Oh, I want to ask you a question, a very logistical question, Judy. Because of Alex's question, you referring to a specific slide, I was wondering if you're okay if we share your slides with our audience.
Yes, I think
Okay.
we gave you a PDF version of the slides,
You
so
did.
you can
You
certainly you can certainly share that.
Perfect. Perfect. So I will share that with everyone. Everyone who has attended this webinar today will get a PDF of the slides. So you'll be able to refer to any specific slide that Judy pointed out information from. So perfect. Patrick Burns has a question that maybe we've addressed already, but you tell me, how long does it take for these batteries to be considered state safe after we store them?
If you haven't stored them safely, they cannot be considered safe at any point. So you have to make sure that you do the right things about storage, whether it's packing. It depends on what you're going to do next with it, right? If it's just for disposal, you want to make sure that you package them individually, seal packages. Make sure if they're just batteries and not in devices, that they have their terminals, taped off, and so on. One thing that we do advise, and this is something that I mentioned about our advice to Customs and Border Patrol, is if you plan to use your batteries at a later stage, you can always store them in a cold storage, 50 degrees F or lower. You could have walk-in storage where you're actually storing them in cold storage. That actually freezes the electrolyte, or I won't say it freezes, it cools down the electrolyte, and also, keeps them in a much more safer, condition than, if it is at warm temperatures, where you can actually cause more decomposition and degradation.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Kendall Christensen, our friend Kendall Christensen, points out that the Department of Sanitation for the City of New York, according to the information Kendall has, recently received a $2.15 million grant to hold at least 200 mobile battery collection drop-off events. He's not sure whether it was DOE or EPA that was the funding, but maybe there's another city that we need to reach out to and solicit information from to put together a more complete picture. So thank you for that, Kendall. We're going to follow up with that, because where that money came from and knowing how far they've gotten with that and how that will work would be a wonderful sort of educational, I think, moment for our folks.
Certainly, yes.
Right. Let's see. Patrick Burns followed up and said, we took them from the homeowner because they started a fire. So I think that's relative to the safe storage issue.
Yes.
But I think what you, Judy, stood very well. So I think I may have gotten to all the questions that are in the queue as of right now. So I'm wondering, Andrew, do you have any additional questions you want to follow up with? Or are there any points that you wanted to add, Judy? We can go either way with this. We have about 7 minutes of webinar time left.
So I thought, excellent presentation. The questions I had jotted down along the way have been addressed. So, but I did have one for you, Jubi, which may allow for some education conversation for everybody involved. And so it seems to me like this might be a topic for the U.S. Conference of Mayors to look at a little more fully once we are all educated and can inform them. Would this be something that the U.S. Conference of Mayors could pass a resolution on in terms of supporting increased education, et cetera, for proper battery recycling? And can you talk through how that process would work, the formation of a resolution?
Right. This is what I wish for my boss, Judy Jeevarajan, who is the environmental chief for the United States Conference of Mayors, which, by the way, is the parent organization of this organization, MWMA. This is when I wish she was available to talk. So Judy, if you are available to talk and around, I know you joined the webinar earlier, please do raise your hand so I can unmute you and you can tell folks. But the short answer to your question, which has a lot longer information behind it, is yes, Andrew. Absolutely, this type of resolution is the type of resolution that has been introduced in the past at the United States Conference of Mayors. Just for those of you who are on the call that aren't familiar, to give you a little background to let you know what Andrew's talking about. Our parent organization, the United States Conference of Mayors, adopts policies that they believe are beneficial to cities and then advocate primarily at the federal level, but also often at the state level to get government agencies to adopt those policies and to put resources where cities can best use those resources. So we may have a resolution that looks like that. I do not know. I would have to do the research. But there are a couple of ways that happens. The short answer to how that resolution happens is some mayor of a member city of the Conference of Mayors decides they think it's important, and therefore they introduce it into the relative committee, which in this case would be Judy's committee, the Environment Committee of the United States Conference of Mayors. Every year at their annual meeting, they consider whatever resolutions mayors propose. And it's interesting because we literally just passed the annual meeting. It ended on Sunday of this past week. And at those meetings, they consider resolutions and adopt them. The trick is getting a mayor to have that idea if they don't have it on their own. So what often MWMA as an organization has done is convene a working group on an issue that they thought was important, develop draft resolution language for that issue, and then ask one of their mayors if it's a committee of folks, maybe one or more of their mayors are willing to support the resolution at the Conference of Mayors, or finding a mayor who's amenable to submitting the resolution on their behalf. And we've done that any number of times in the past, and that does typically lead to the organization adopting the resolution. And what that would do is it would have the force of policy effect for the Conference of Mayors, which means two things. One, they'll recommend that their 1,400 member cities across the country adopt a resolution. But number two, when these issues come up with EPA or DOE or any other governmental agency, they're going to now base their advocacy on the language and stipulations of that resolution. So once a resolution is adopted, it has the full force of policy, and it will be Judy's job and other folks' jobs to make sure that that happens. Let's see. I think we are coming up on 11:57. So I think hopefully that answered most of your question, Andrew.
Perfect.
Great. So that is maybe something we can discuss more with the MWMA Executive Committee. But at this point, with a couple of minutes left, maybe we say thank you to Judy. Judy, do you have any closing words you want to share before I throw it back to Andrew?
No, I think I would, just like to say that we all need to take action, and if we can help in any way with the education part, with our educational materials, we would certainly love to do that. So feel free to reach out to us and share a copy of the presentation, and any questions that come up, we are here to answer.
Perfect. We will absolutely share a copy of the presentation with everyone, which has Judy's email in it. And we will look forward to talking to you more about this issue in the coming months.
Yes.
Andrew,
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. And Andrew, back to you.
Thank you. A video of today's webinar will be posted to the MWMA website in the next few days. Jubi is going to be hopefully putting that web address in the chat now, but just in case, it's www.usmayors.org/MWMA. Feel free to share that link with your colleagues who could not make it today. And as may have been already alluded to, we plan to take a deeper dive into this topic at our annual Fall Summit in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The dates for that summit are September 10th, 11th, and 12th. Registration for the summit will go live in the next 2 weeks, and at that time, you'll be able to view the full summit agenda. And we'd love if you would consider joining us. That is it, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.